Figuring out like what's going on with the.
Well, usually when you don't know how to solve a problem in math on this test, start drawing, graph stuff. Okay.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph both of these inequalities. And then I'm going to see if I can figure out what they're talking about after I do that. Okay. Now, normally I would ask you to do this, but since I don't really want to spend the entire session on these difficult problems, I'll just kind of go through it. Okay.
Okay.
So if I'm graphing that, I'm graphing a straight line, only it's an inequality. So, but its slope is 2 and its y-intercept is 1. So it's pretty much going to look something like that, and it's going to be a solid line. Now, the key thing you need to know is which side of that do I graph? Above or below the red line?
Above.
Yeah, because that says greater than. Okay, so I'm graphing this side. I could shade it in with a color, but I really don't want to. Um, and then I'm going to graph this one. Okay, well, that starts at, instead of 1, minus a half. And I have a slope, and that is a dotted line, not a solid line. You understand why it's dotted?
Yeah.
Okay. Which side of that do I graph?
The top.
Okay. So we can see, if I use a different color here, it's a little bit easier. If I'm anything there is above the dotted line, and what I'm looking for are areas that are both. Well, if I shade it in, I've got this like this. You see how I get this?
Mhm.
Okay. Now, the solution has to be in that orange area. Which quadrant contains no solutions?
Quadrant 5.
4.
4.
That's 4. Okay. Yeah, immediately. In other words, you don't really have to figure out what the solution is. The solution is not a single point, it's a region of a graph. And in fact, the only way to show this solution is graphically. You really, or to give you the equations. That's another way of showing it. But once you graph it, then you can see immediately that there's no solution in quadrant 4. There is in quadrant 1, there is in quadrant 2, and there is in quadrant 3. But nothing shows up in quadrant 4. Hold on 1 minute. All right. So that really wasn't too terribly difficult. It's just that you really had to understand how to graph inequalities and which side to shade. And then finding the common region. The orange region is my common region. And the solution has to lie in that common region. Do these in order. 29. I'm going to skip 29 for the moment. Let's go to 30. Okay, take a look at 30. All of these have 4 answers. So we know D has to be 1. 30 is definitely a more difficult problem, but it, like all of the difficult problems, really illustrates principles that you kind of need to know.
Mm. Hold on. Wouldn't it have to be A?
Well, I can see why you picked A. It's tempting to pick A. First of all, A is that function factored.
Yeah.
X plus 3 times x minus 5. Unfortunately, what you get when you factor that are merely the zeros.
Mm.
Okay? And you don't know for sure. Read the rest of the question. Read the bottom half of the question.
The coordinate vertex A can be identified with constant equation.
In other words, can you figure out the vertex from this format?
Mm.
Not really. What they're asking you is which of the coordinates of vertex A can be identified as constants in the equation. Well, it's true that that equals that, but it doesn't allow you to tell it what where the vertex is. Okay? This is incorrect. That doesn't factor that way. This one might be correct, but that's not really any format. In other words, this one also does equal that, but again, it doesn't tell you where the vertex is. Well, look at D. That is vertex format. Vertex format is this. Over here on the left. If you have a quadratic that is in this format, then the vertex is H and K. Okay? Now,
Okay.
notice that D is the only answer that's in vertex format. A is 1, H is 1, and K is negative 16. Well, if that is the only one in vertex format, tell me where the vertex is.
Where it is?
In other words, remember what the question says. Which is the only one that allows us to figure out where the vertex is immediately? It's D. D is in vertex format. Remember the format. H is the x coordinate of the vertex. K is the y coordinate of the vertex. So if D is the only one that's in vertex format, what is the vertex?
D.
What is the well, that answers it, but I want you to tell me where the vertex is.
Would that be negative 16?
That's the y
Or
coordinate. What's the x coordinate? Remember, here's the vertex right there. That's got an x and a y coordinate on it.
negative 15?
Oh, here's the x coordinate right there. In other words, the h is the x coordinate. Look at this format up here on the upper left. That is the standard format. some constant times x minus another constant squared plus a third constant. Well, that one is the only one that's in that format right there.
Yeah.
And h has to be 1. There's h right there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's h right there. It's 1. It's x minus h. So h is positive 1. Furthermore, you can look at the graph and see that the vertex comes at an x coordinate of 1 and a y coordinate slightly below minus 15. So that makes a whole lot of sense given their picture. So it really was not a tough question. It's just it was well disguised. It was a trick question because all 4 of these, that one, that one, that one, and that one, do indeed equal that. But only the bottom one allows you to know what the vertex is immediately from the format that it's in. So if you knew that, you wouldn't really have to do any math. You could answer this question in 10 seconds. Answer has to be D.
Okay.
Let's see what else. Yeah, let's do some grids. Now, when you go from section to section on the SAT, it starts back to easy, medium, difficult again. So
Okay.
we just figured, or we just ended one section, which ended with difficult problems. But now that we go to the grid with calculator, these are going to be easy in the beginning. So don't be fooled by the number 31. This 31 is an easy problem, even though number 30 was a tough problem. It's because each section restarts its easy, medium, hard. And that's important to know. You know, you don't want to fool yourself into thinking that 31 is a really hard problem. It's not. It's going to be an easy problem. So let's try to do it.
Okay. $18 per hour. Wait.
Notice that it says what is a possible amount. So it's not looking for an answer, it's looking for one of many. So you don't need a specific answer. You don't need a range even. You just need a number that's in the range. So what's the smallest amount that he might shuck or husk?
The smallest. Wait.
Yeah, let's say he's having a bad day and he's only doing 12 per hour as opposed to 18 per hour, right? He's having a really good day, he's doing 18 per hour. He's having a bad day, he's doing 12 per hour. So let's say he's having a bad day. How long is it going to take him to shuck 72 dozen ears of corn if he can do 12 dozen per hour? You got your calculator in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how many hours it would be to do 12?
What is the possible amount in hours for him to shuck 72? Don't be fooled by the dozen. The numbers are 12, 18, and 72. They're all dozen. So there's no conversion needed.
Would it be 4 hours for 72?
Yeah, no. What's 72 divided by 12?
72 divided 6.
Okay, so it might take him 6 hours if he's having a bad day. What would it take him if he's really having a good day? He woke up, he got a good night's sleep, he comes in and he can do 18 per hour. How many hours is it going to take him there?
4.
So somewhere in between is a proper answer. Now, this means that 4 would work or 6 would work. That means that both of those numbers would work. But why even worry about that? Let's just pick a number in between. How about 5 hours?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm putting down as an answer. Because I got to do some interpretation of English to figure out whether this is greater than or equal or just greater than. In other words, it might be, depending on the wording, that 6 and 4 don't work as answers. In other words, if it would have said he can do 12 or more dozen or greater, less than 12 or whatever, they could have worded it in a way where it wouldn't have been greater than or equal. It would have been just greater than. So don't worry about figuring that out. Just immediately choose a number in between.
Okay.
It did not have to be a multiple of 6 or 4. All right, let me scroll down. Remember, we're in easy territory. Always know what you're expecting. Expecting it, because a lot of times they can really fool you. In other words, here's a problem that's got 9 sentences or 9 lines to it. Well, immediately that tells me this is an easy problem, not a hard problem.
Wait. Oh. What is the maximum possible value for X that will be a combined weight of the truck driver and boxes? Each box weighs 14 pounds.
So what can the boxes weigh? How much?
Wait, sorry, what?
Well, the truck and its driver weigh 4,500 pounds without any boxes in it.
Yeah.
The bridge can only hold 6,000 pounds. So what's the maximum the boxes can weigh?
1,500 for all the boxes?
Correct. So their weight has to be less than 1,500. Otherwise, everybody plunges to their death. Okay? And
Okay.
each box is identical. There are X of them, and each one weighs 14 pounds. So 14 times X is what has to be less than 1,500. Use your calculator, solve that.
$107?
Exactly.
No.
107.1.
0.4.
0.4. Okay, now what's the answer to the question? This one, they don't want just any old answer. They want the maximum possible value of X.
So wouldn't it just be 107?
Correct. It's not 107.4. It's 107 because you can't have 0.4 of a box. You can only have integer number of boxes. Hold on one second. I don't know. I think I might have left my TV on. One moment. Be back in a second. All right. Sorry. So you can see it's very important to read the stuff Out. Out. Because we just had two questions, and one said one possible value, and the other said the maximum possible value. So, you know, if you didn't see that maximum possible value, you might think, oh, 106 works. Because it does work. 106 boxes would pass over the bridge safely. But that's not the maximum possible. All right. Oops, hold on. Again, we are in easy to medium territory. We shouldn't certainly be in hard yet. I mean, we're only on the third question of this section. So when you have, if this were on the ACT test, this would be a science question. That's what the science section of the ACT is all about, is questions like interpreting graphs. Okay? So the first thing you should do when you read or see a problem like this is to read the title, or understand what the horizontal axis means, and know what the vertical axis means, and know the units. The vertical axis is in millionths, or millions rather. So this point right here is like 50 million. This point is 60 million. So it's really important that you understand the units, because they may try to trick you. Okay, so this first question doesn't look tricky. So what's the fraction between the number that were sold in 2008 and the number sold in 2011?
Number sold in 2008 was 100 million, and then 2011 was 160 million.
Reduce that fraction and you'll have your answer. Remember, we're in the easy section. Now notice in this case, you don't need to add the millions, because I'm going to have a million in the numerator and a million in the denominator, so the millions are going to cancel. In fact, I can cancel that and that. And now what is 10/16 reduced to? Actually, that is an acceptable answer, believe it or not. When you are in the grid-in section of the SAT, you do not have to simplify fractions. You can certainly convert that to a decimal using your calculator if you wanted. But the way that should be gridded in is you can grid it in like this. That would be accepted. It's also 5/8, so they would also accept that. And it's also 0.625, I believe, is the decimal for that fraction. So any of those three, but oddly enough, they do not make you simple. One of the few times in math where they accept a non-simplified fraction.
"30-minute time slot station can sell for Tuesday and Wednesday." Wait. Would it be 720? Wait, no.
Well, let's start with a simple. How many can they sell in one day?
720?
No. How many 30-minute intervals are in a 24-hour day? How many hour intervals are in a 24-hour day?
24.
So how many 30-minute intervals are there?
12.
48. You're
Oh,
doubling. You're doubling, not. You see why you double it
yeah.
instead of cutting it in half? So that's per 24-hour day. Okay. Now don't get caught up that it's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. Those are just 2 days. So if we're going to do 48 per a 24-hour day, how many are we going to do in 2 days?
Would you wait? Hold on, 42.
We're going to do 48 in a day.
Yeah,
So how many are we going to do in 2 days?
96.
All right. $35. Now, the one thing you need to know to do this problem is the formula for the volume of a cylinder.
Okay.
Now, SAT gives you these formulas at the beginning of the math section. They give you a whole page of these, and they give you the formula for this. Rather than me scrolling up and finding it, I'll just go ahead and give it to you.
Okay.
It's the area of the base, pi r squared, times the height, which is 8. Okay? So they're telling us, they're giving us the volume. So now I can fill that in. 72 pi equals 8 pi r squared. Take it from here. What they want is the diameter of that base.
Oh.
Tell me how to proceed from this point.
Well, 8 pi squared is 78.9.
First of all, the square does not apply to the 8 or the pi. It applies only to the r. I did not write it with parentheses around all three. So to solve this equation, we want to isolate r. The first thing we have to do is isolate r squared. So how do I isolate r squared? What's r squared equal to?
I can't remember.
What is the 8 and the pi doing to the r squared at the moment?
Multiplying it,
Yes. So what do I have to do to get rid of it?
divide it.
Okay. That's basically the way you solve all equations. Whatever the unnecessary stuff is doing, you do the opposite. If the 8 pi was being added, I would have subtracted it. If it was a divider, I would have multiplied. You just do the opposite. Okay? Now, notice that gets rid of that and that. I's cancel. 72 divided by 8 is 9. So I have r squared equals 9. What is r equal to? If r squared equals 9, solve that for r.
Wait, is that 18? Wait, no.
Well, is 18 squared equal to 9?
No. Wait.
So come up with an answer that first of all makes sense. This is not hard. This is a real easy one to do. But it's got to make sense. You can't come up with a number that when you square it, it's nowhere near 9.
Oh, 3.
Okay. 3 squared is 9. Okay. Now, unfortunately, they don't ask for r. They ask for diameter. So if the radius is 3, what's the diameter?
Uh,
The relationship between a radius and a diameter. Here's a radius. There's a diameter.
oh, it'd be 6.
Okay. Don't overthink these. Some of them are relatively easy. Now we're going to 36. You can tell that we're getting towards the end of the section because it says stop. So 38 is the last one. So we know we're not in the easy territory anymore. Probably we're in medium to hard.
Okay.
But it's important you understand a few concepts on 36. You can solve it or not, you need to know something. What makes a function undefined? If I told you, hold on. You definitely need to know that. If I said y equals 1 over x, what value of x makes y undefined?
What value of x?
There's only one on the entire spectrum of numbers. There is only one value of x that makes y undefined. It is the first rule of mathematics.
0.
Thou shalt not divide by 0. Okay? So that's the general answer when you have a function, is that you cannot let this be 0. Well, for this function to be undefined, that would have to be 0. Now, that is just part of it. They're not going to make it that easy, but what we're going to do is we're going to say x minus 5 squared plus 4 times x minus 5 plus 4 has to equal 0, because that's what would make that denominator, or that's what would make h of x undefined, would be if that denominator was equal to 0. Okay? Now, at this point, you just kind of have to do the math. In other words, if you get this far in realizing that, then I'm sure you can do the math. The math I'll do quickly. All I'm doing is expanding that and distributing that, and then combining everything. So that now I have x squared, and I have minus 6x, and I have plus 9 equals 0. Now you solve a quadratic by factoring. That's x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. So clearly, if x is equal to 3, it makes that quadratic 0. And that's the answer. And those are the steps. But this probably the hardest step to no, maybe not. That might be the easiest step to recognize, that you're going to set that entire denominator equal to 0. you still have to solve that. Solving it's not that easy. You have to expand everything, distribute everything, combine like terms, end up with a simpler quadratic, factor it. You have to know how to factor quadratic and then solve it. All right. Okay, this is probably one that you want to know how to do also. You've had this in class, right? Where you take an amount of money and you compound it, or
Yeah.
something decays. Well, that's all this is. Okay.
Earns 2% interest compound annually. Furnished deposit of 100x change from the value of the account after 2 years.
So let's underline some stuff. In general, I would say SAT is not as tricky as ACT. So if they got a number in it, then it's probably an important number. So that's important. That's important. That's important. Bless you.
Thank you.
So, and that's important. Compounded annually. Because if you remember right, there's 3 different ways to compound money. You can compound it annually. You can compound it more often than annual, like monthly. Or you can compound it continuously. And there's 3 different formulas for each one. But the simplest formula is this one for compounding it annually, which is what they want. Does that look familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the formula we want to use. And this is it right here. So tell me what a sub 0 is.
100.
Okay. What is the amount inside the parentheses equal to?
2.
It's 2%. Always remember you got to convert percents to decimals.
So 0.02.
Percents do not work in equations, ever. Always have to turn a percent into a decimal. So what goes inside the parentheses, which is what the question's asking about? They want to know what is x. Well, we can see that 1 plus r is x. And they've told us r, so what is x?
0.02.
It's 1.02. It's 1 plus r.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, it's 1 plus 0.02, which is 1.02. So that's 1.02. All right, and let's see if we can get, we can get to 38. That'll be the last question. But it applies to that same concept. In other words, the same paragraph above 37.
The value of x.
Okay, so what 36 is doing is giving us 2 conditions. Okay, one starts with $100 and is earning 2%, and the other starts with $100 and is earning 2.5%. Okay, so over here on the left, I'm going to talk about Jessica, what Jessica's going to make. hold on. This thing is not very reliable. Okay, so the amount that Jessica is going to make, we've already figured out that that is $100 times 1.02 to the t power. T being the number of years that she leaves it in there. Her friend, Tyshawn, he took the same $100, but instead of getting 2%, he gets 2.5%. So if I add 2.5 to this, I get that number. After 10 years. So in your calculator, you need to come up with a number after plugging in a t of 10. You know how to do that?
I think so. Wait, so then I would do 100 and then do the parentheses and then
What kind
do
of calculator do you have, Haley?
a TI-83.
Probably the best way to do it is to take 1.02 and raise it to the 10 power and then multiply that by 100. What do you get?
121.8.
Now do the same thing, the bottom one, only take 1.025 and raise it to the 10th power and multiply that by 100. You want to do it in that order. That 100 is not being taken to the 10th power. It's only what's in the parentheses is being taken to the 10th power. What's that give you?
128.000.
Exactly. Okay, and then the question says, how much more money will Tishan have than Jessica? So the answer is the difference between those two numbers. So it's $6.20, assuming you didn't round off on the first one. That was 121.8 exactly?
It was 121.89.
Ah, see, so it really matters. Because now that alone changes the answer to $6.11. And if there's round off error there, that's not even correct. So when you're dealing in dollars and cents, always take it out to 3 digits. Because I don't know if that's $121.89 or does it round up to 90 cents or does it round down to 89 cents? I need the other digit to know. And you can definitely see that it made a huge difference. And this is the section of the test where we're gridding in the answers. So you would definitely want accuracy. In other words, they're not giving you multiple choice here. All right. So I believe that is the end of test 1. Let's go to test 2. If nothing else, we'll be starting with really easy questions, right? In other words, the beginning of the tests are always the easy questions. And back to that, remember when I said they gave you the formulas? This is what I was talking about. And there is the formula for that right cylinder. Volume equals the area of the base, which is pi r squared, times the height. And notice everything is in terms of radius. You don't get a lot of formulas that are diameter. It's just diameter is not the most important number, radius is. All these formulas are in terms of radius. Now, it's true that a radius is half of a diameter, but you'll never see a formula that's in terms of diameter. Even this circumference up here, it says 2 pi r, that's the way I want to see that formula. I don't want to see pi d, even though it's true. And it's shorter. It's just that d is not important, r is.
Okay.
Okay, number 1.
If 5x.
Tell me your steps. Tell me what your first step is. What can you do when they tell you this?
Putting a number in for x?
No? Can you solve for x?
No.
Yes, you can. That's one equation and one variable. That always means you can solve for it. If I do the math here, I get x equals 4/5. Okay? Once you've solved for x, now plug that into that one. Do the math and come up with the answer. It's 10 times 4/5 plus 3. What is
11.
that? Okay. So there's your answer. Now, occasionally they will put little tricks. For example, if I were to say, what is 10x plus 12? I don't have to solve for x like I did with this one. I can look immediately and see that 10x plus 12 is exactly 2 times that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, has to be 2 times that. So, if they would have asked what is 10x plus 12, I could have immediately said 20 without doing any math. Because they didn't ask for something that was a perfect multiple of what they told us, then you got to do it the hard way. You got to solve for it. And this is not easily back solved. There's really only one way I can think of to do this, and that is to solve that equation for x and then plug that value in for x and figure out what that's equal to.
Okay.
Number 2. This is the second. If you'll remember the first test, started out with a simple linear equation you had to solve, and then also in the easy section, they gave you a system of equations you have to solve. Well, maybe. Maybe we got to solve this. Maybe we don't. We got 2 minutes. Let's say you had 2 minutes in the test. Can A be the right answer?
No.
No, because it doesn't satisfy. In other words, at a very minimum, you got to satisfy that equation. B does. C does. D does not. -2 plus -2 is -4.
Yeah.
So if you're guessing and you only had 20 seconds, you've narrowed your answer choices down to 2. Okay. Now, both of these fit the first equation. The question is, which ones fit the second equation? Well, 3 times 2 is 6. -2 times -2, which is a -4. That's equal to 10. There's the answer. Don't even look at C. Once you find one that works, in other words, this answer B works for both equations. So you didn't have to choose the more difficult technique, which would have been either substitution or elimination, which is the traditional way that you would solve two equations and two unknowns. Particularly when they're in this kind of format, you would use elimination. But in this case here, you can eliminate two answers. So in a way, you do solve it by elimination, but not really. Not the same kind of elimination.
Okay.
Haley, I will talk to you next time.
Thank you.
I will make a note. We got through two. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.